Who would win in an election between Governor Andy Beshear and the current Vice President of the U.S., J.D. Vance? Today we'll be figuring just that out. Before we get started though, looks like I gained about 3 subscribers yesterday. If you guys have a chance to press subscribe and like, it would be much appreciated. But now we will get to the prediction. So we'll start out on the West Coast and then move eastward. So we already have the Pacific Coast that is reliably blue. We get to the first swing state, that being the state of Nevada. This state, I think Beshear would very easily win. Beshear has won as a governor in a state that is deep, deep red. As you can see there, Kentucky on the presidential level is in the solid red category. So the fact that a Democrat can win in a state like that, there are, for gubernatorial elections, sometimes the state votes opposite. For example, Vermont and New Hampshire are looking like they will elect Republican governors. So there are some states that don't follow their presidential preferences when it comes to the gubernatorial elections. But for the presidential, I am fairly confident that Nevada would end up in the lean blue margin. And then we get to Arizona. Arizona, I'm not certain. I think it really could go either way. For now, I'm going to put it in the tilt blue column. This state, Biden was able to win it in 2020. Democrats hadn't won it in a while until then. Now the state has 2 Democratic senators and a Democratic governor, and is largely looking like they will back the Democrats in 2028. Before we go any further, we can take a look at the prediction markets. Overall landscape gives Democrats roughly a 60% chance of winning the presidency. Should point out we're still quite a ways out until 2028, so a lot really could change. Just a hypothetical between these 2 candidates, but that's going to be the call there in Arizona. And then we're going to get to the congressional district in the Omaha area. This is kind of a somewhat blue dot in a red state. It voted for Harris in 2024. It's virtually the only competitive race that Harris ended up winning, went blue. And I think in 2028, if the election were to be held today, that it would go blue by a more extensive margin. The national environment for Democrats has been consistently improving, and Trump's approval rating has been falling. Now, bear in mind, Trump won't be the 2028 Republican nominee, but his approval rating will impact the race when whoever the party ends up using as the nominee for each respective party. But that's going to be the call there in Nebraska. Now we're going to head over to the other half of the Sun Belt. We get to Georgia, blue column. This state went blue in 2020, much like Arizona did. The state has 2 Democratic senators and a Republican governor. It is looking like, at the moment, at least according to the prediction markets, that the Democrats are looking good to flip the gubernatorial seat there in the state of Georgia. So that's going to be the call there. But for the presidential level, I think it would most likely end up in the tilt blue column. And then we get to North Carolina, which is probably the state I'm the least certain about calling. I do think this is probably the state J.D. Vance has the best hope of winning in, but I think with a really good candidate like Andy Beshear, very moderate, he would play well enough, and the national environment is looking really good for Democrats. I mean, we've seen for example, Wisconsin in the Supreme Court race, won by 20 points if I remember correctly, it was 40-60. Where Democrats won that election. And if Democrats can do that well in a swing state like Wisconsin, I think that North Carolina could narrowly flip blue. That's going to be the call there in North Carolina. And that gets Governor Andy Beshear over the 270 finish line to 275. Republican J.D. Vance sitting at 219. And then we'll get going through the rest of the Rust Belt. We'll start out with Wisconsin, hinted at it earlier, but that is going to be in the lean blue column. Nothing crazy there. This state, if I remember correctly, was the closest state of the swing states in 2024. It did end up going to Trump, just like the rest of the Rust Belt, but it was certainly close. The Harris campaign put a lot of effort into that state. They did end up ultimately losing it, but it was relatively close. And then we get to Michigan and Pennsylvania. I'm going to start with Michigan. In Michigan, I think that would probably be a lean victory. However, I'm not going to do the same call for the state of Pennsylvania. For that one, I think things would be a little more narrow. I think if J.D. Vance is going to win a swing state, he would probably win North Carolina first. But as far as Pennsylvania goes, did not mean to put it in the tilt red column. But the state, there we go, tilt blue. And that's going to bring Governor Andy Beshear to 319 to J.D. Vance's 219. And that is the prediction. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.